All right, so this is what we're doing today. We're doing something a little bit different. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a variety of different subjects. And I'm looking down because I've got a list of things that I'm going to talk about. And I was going to tell you how many, but I couldn't count and tell you at the same time. So we'll just say a variety. There's a few different topics that I want to tackle today. What that basically means is if you're watching this on Instagram, go to my YouTube channel and you'll be able to get the whole video, because what I'm going to do is just upload a little bit of this on my Instagram, because you can only put like I think 10 minutes or 15 minutes on Instagram, and I reckon I'm going to go longer than that today. Alternatively, you can go on my you can download my podcast on your favorite podcast platform. I'm on all of them: Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, Google. Wherever you look, I'll be there. All you got to do is search The Battle Camp. Yeah, so that's all of the housekeeping stuff out of the way. So let's just talk about the stuff that we're here to talk about, not me and my shitty content. So first and foremost, Israel Adesanya and Jon Jones. So look, it's like, you know when two people are swinging a skipping rope and there's someone in the middle and they're like trying to wait. Like, when shall I start jumping? When shall I catch the wave? That's what I've been like when it comes to this particular topic, because every day something happens and I'm like, well, let's just wait, and then we'll talk about it tomorrow. And then I'll go to sleep and then I'll wake up in the morning and they've been going at each other on Twitter again. Do you know what I mean? They've been going back and forth ever since Izzy won, which wasn't even last weekend, it was the weekend before. So it's been going on for over a week. They've just been talking absolute shit about each other. And there's a couple of things that I just wanted to weigh in on, just wanted to weigh in on a couple of things with regards to their ongoing beef. Firstly, I saw a lot of people getting their panties in a bunch because Israel Adesanya mentioned Jon Jones's mum, who is now unfortunately deceased. And a lot of people got quite angry about that. Oh no, he shouldn't be talking about the dead. He shouldn't be talking about Jon Jones's mum. But I didn't see what all the fuss was about, because he didn't disrespect Jon Jones's mum. He just mentioned his mum in a tweet that was disrespecting Jon Jones. And that was in a response to a tweet that Jon Jones posted about Israel Adesanya's dad. And all Israel Adesanya said is, your mum would not be proud of you, or something like that, or she'd be ashamed of you, one of those two. That's not disrespecting his mum. And I didn't quite understand why people were so angry about the fact that Israel Adesanya had said that. That's kind of all I wanted to say about that one topic. But all of that aside, the way these two have been going back and forth on Twitter, you think that they've got a fight booked. Do you know what I mean? Like, the back and forth between them, the clear and obvious dislike that they have for each other, it just makes me feel like there's no better time for them two to fight each other, because there's no clear number one contender in the 185-pound division, because obviously Jared Cannonier is going to be fighting Whitaker, and I think that's in November or something like that. No, actually, that's on the undercard of the Khabib fight, so that's October 24, something along those lines. So they ain't fighting for another month. No, it's not even another month, it's a couple of weeks. Fucking hell, man. Time flies when you're not having fun, eh? So they ain't fighting for another couple of weeks. So they're going to need some time off and turn around for another... If they are to fight, I don't think another 185-pound fight will happen before the end of the year. I'm pretty sure Israel Adesanya has already said that he wants to fight before the end of the year. Jon Jones doesn't have a dance partner. He clearly wants to fight. He's clearly itching to get back in there. He wants to be in the centre of attention again. And this is the perfect opportunity for this fight to be made. And the reason I say that is there's no title at stake. So if the two of them fight at 205 pounds, UFC don't have this dilemma about asking Israel Adesanya, you got to move up now. You got to be a light heavyweight. Like, you can't hold two belts at once. We can't have two divisions being held up because there's a bottleneck, because there's only one champion. I don't think a fight between Jon Jones and Israel Adesanya needs a belt. I think it's big enough to sell, and I think it would sell shitloads, because I think the way these two, the dynamic between the two of them, and during the promotion of the fight, I think this is the kind of fight that can gather a lot of steam and a lot of attention from the casual audience. I just think timing wise for both fighters, it's good timing. Like John Jones clearly has been quite vocal about the fact that he wants to move up to heavyweight, but he's not done it yet. He's not done it yet, and he's kind of in no man's land. He's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, because he wants to move up to heavyweight, but he isn't in a position to demand a title shot right off the bat, because of the fact that Francis Ngannou is just such a clear-cut number one contender. Stipe Miocic is dragging his heels over a fight with Khabib, and why would he want to fight? I mean, with Francis. I don't know why I said Khabib there. With Francis, and there's like a bit of a there's a bit of a standoff at heavyweight in terms of what the next fight is going to be. And I don't think that John Jones figures in any of those plans. So if he is to move up to heavyweight, one, he's already in a bit of a difficult position with the UFC over what he is demanding in terms of pay. And he's not going to get his demands in terms of pay fighting any heavyweight, right? If he wants to get paid what he thinks he deserves, then the fight that will get him to that level or close to it is a fight against Israel Adesanya. From Israel Adesanya's standpoint, I don't feel like he's got much to lose apart from bragging rights. I honestly don't feel like if he goes up to 205 and loses, I don't think that will hinder or that will be a black mark on his legacy as such, because he's not exactly. I mean, he's tall. He's a tall guy, but he's not a big middleweight. He's not a guy that needs to cut massive amount of weight just to get down to middleweight. Like he weighs in regularly, like below the 185-pound mark. I'm pretty sure he weighed in for his fight against Paulo Costa at 183, 184 pounds, and he had something around his neck, which obviously weighed a few pounds as well. So he was even lighter than that. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know what he walks around at. All I know is that 205 would, one, it won't be an issue for him, and two, I feel like, and I'm going to come into my next point, John Jones wouldn't struggle to get back down to 205. Like I've heard people, I won't say people, I heard DC and Ariel Helwani discussing this fight, and DC was making this point about John Jones and how this fight, if they have it, it should be at catch weight at 210 pounds or something like that. And I was thinking, why? Like, he hasn't actually made the jump. He hasn't gone and really bulked up and got to a position where going back to 205 is a no-go for him anymore. Like, let's remember, when he was off banned, all he was doing was lifting weights and bulking up and getting bigger for some reason. Like, he just fell in love with weightlifting. And that was, a lot of people attributed his performance against Ovin St. Preux because of the fact that he spent so much time in the gym lifting weights rather than drilling technique. Do you know what I mean? So he's already done that before. He's already put on weight. He's already put on size and muscle, but he's managed to come back down to 205 pounds. So I don't think he has the body shape that will make it impossible for him to come down to 205, even if he does bulk up in an attempt to go to heavyweight. But right now he hasn't even started that, or he might have started that journey, but he's not so far along where he can't turn back and get back to 205 pounds. So I don't understand why there's so much like, oh, well, it's going to be difficult for him. No, it's not going to be difficult. It shouldn't be difficult. Like, it might be difficult for Daniel Cormier, but it won't be difficult for John Jones. And those two guys are built very differently. Do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of people are actually now turning the other way when it comes to this fight. When people are kind of considering who's going to win this fight, a lot of people are basically saying that, oh, I think Israel would beat John Jones. And one, I think it's very difficult. It's a natural human kind of instinct to lean on recency bias, and you see what Israel Adesanya has been doing at middleweight, and then you see John Jones, even though he's been winning his fights at light heavyweight, they haven't been as emphatic as they once were. So then you start weighing those two things up, and you start thinking to yourself, oh, you know, Israel's really good at this. His takedown defense is really good. I think Israel Adesanya would beat John Jones and whatnot. So I try not to do that, but I'm not going to sit here and say I think Israel Adesanya is going to win. I've just got this theory on John Jones, and a lot of people are predicating this opinion on John Jones basically declining in his ability. Like, he's not as good as he was. I saw Luke Thomas kind of rattling off a list of his attempt or his takedown success. You know, he attempted 9 takedowns in this fight and he only succeeded twice, and he attempted 7 in this fight and he only succeeded 3 times, and in this fight he tried it 8 times and he done it once, but that didn't really count because his opponent got right back up. I made those numbers up, but that was kind of what he was trying to say. He was giving examples of the fight, his most recent fight, so against Reyes, against Santos, and against, who else did he fight before that? Smith. So those were the examples he was giving. And I've said this previously months ago, and I'm going to say it again. I don't know whether Jon Jones has declined so much. I just think his instinct for fighting has changed. And the reason his instinct for fighting has changed is I think the level of competition in front of him just has improved so much. Like, the Jon Jones that we think about is from an era where fighters had obvious strengths and weaknesses. The era that these guys are fighting in at the moment, everybody's well-rounded. You might have a strength. Israel's strength is clearly his stand-up, but that doesn't mean that his takedown defense is non-existent. That doesn't mean that if he's in on the ground in bottom position, he can't work his way back up. And these are the kind of guys that Jon Jones was fighting when he first burst onto the scene and he first became champion. People like Rampage Jackson. Like, Rampage Jackson is a legend of the sport and he's achieved so much. But that fight against Jon Jones, you just knew if Jon Jones takes him down, even though Rampage had this wrestling background, you just knew if Jon Jones takes him down, he'll struggle to get back up. And that's what happened. But that's not what fighters these days, generally speaking, that get to that level where they're fighting for titles, they don't suffer from these problems. They don't suffer from problems where they have big gaping holes in their technique, and there's obvious areas that you can expose and you can focus on with your attacks when you're fighting against them. So I don't know whether Jon Jones has declined so much. I just think that he is he fights with his head a lot, and he understands the level of risk when he's attempting different techniques. And he understands what when he attempts the technique, what he can be countered with. So he's just been more risk averse now. Does that mean that he takes less risks? Because that's what I'm trying to say in a posh way. Does that make sense? He understands what tools his opponents have, so he takes less risks and less chances. And what that basically shows is someone that is less explosive, and someone that isn't able to use techniques that we've seen him use previously, so then we think, oh, he's declined. But he hasn't declined. I just think the competition he's fighting has just improved. And the reason I'm talking about this is Israel Adesanya is a guy on paper that will really trouble Jon Jones, because he's a guy who has good length, and he's a guy that is able to stuff takedowns and keep the fight in an arena that he likes best. So the big question in this fight would be, can Jon Jones close the distance? And if he closes the distance, can he actually get Israel Adesanya to the ground? Because if they just go into a straight stand-up fight, there's only one winner. There's only one winner. And this is why this fight for me is so exciting, and it needs to happen now. And there's this comparison that people make. Oh, is it going to be like Canelo when he fought Mayweather? Like, is it going to come too soon? Is it going to come too late, etc., etc.? I don't think that fits this correctly. And what I think fits this better, and I've forgotten his name now, which is a shame, so I'm going to have to look at it. Let me go on Wikipedia. Because who's the guy that fought Errol Spence Jr.? Errol Spence Jr. Because he was a guy that fought at 135 pounds or something, and then he moved up to 147 to fight Errol Spence. It was Mikey Garcia. So Mikey Garcia was a decorated champion, and then he moved up to 147 pounds. And the reason why I'm talking about him now is people were basically saying that, oh, Mikey Garcia might win this, that he's just got the technique, and Errol Spence schooled him. But the point is, it wasn't too soon for him. It wasn't a question of, oh, I know what Errol Spencer's doing, he's getting him early. It was a guy that was a decorated champion that had won belts in multiple weight classes before he made that move up. And I think this is closer to that. But the difference here is Mikey Garcia's frame and body isn't of a welterweight, even though he's still fighting in that weight class. His frame just isn't correct for that. Like, he stepped on the scales at 147 pounds and he looked fat. He didn't look like an athlete. Because physically, for me, he shouldn't be fighting in that weight class, in that division. But he just wanted to do it because that's the sexy weight class sort of thing. So yeah, why am I keep talking about that? Oh yeah, so look, when it comes to Israel Adesanya, I think Israel Adesanya can come in as a light heavyweight and look like a light heavyweight. And I think it's not a case of this being too early for Israel Adesanya. I don't think it's too early for him. I think this is a good time for this fight to happen. And the fact that there isn't a belt on the line at light heavyweight, it makes it even better. It makes it even better for the UFC and for us as fans, because we get to see a fight. Because I don't give a fuck about any belts. Do you know what I mean? We get to see the fight happen, and there's no bullshit, no politics. You can just go back down to 185 pounds and fight, you know, Jared Cannonier or Whitaker or whoever else is next on the list. But for now, this is the fight that needs to happen. And the way that this is being built, I can't see how the UFC aren't all over this and trying their best to make it happen. So yeah, I felt I was quite passionate there, you know. Felt the passion really pour out of me there. But I'm just